Please rise as the dignitaries. Please stay seated. Please take your seats. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Debate and Literary Society and the Center for Competitive Examinations at Christ deemed to be University, Pune Lavasa Campus, it is my absolute honor to welcome you to the grand finale of the Peitho Cup in the University Asian Parliamentary Debate Championship 2025. I am Ria Rai and I will be moderating the grand finale of Peitho Cup. Over the past days, we have witnessed brilliant displays of argumentation, rebuttals, and strategy. And now, we arrive at the pinnacle of this competition, the final round. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the judges for the grand finale. We have an adjudication panel of 5 judges joining us. The panel is led by Honorable former Justice J. Chalameshwar, whose judicial dissents have shaped public discourse on accountability and democratic values. We are truly honored to have you on the adjudication panel of Peitho Cup, sir. Justice Chalameshwar is joined by Dr. Anish Dore, Dr. Bhushan Sawant, Dr. Lenin Kumar, and Advocate Alina Annabelli. We are grateful to all the judges who are spending their valuable time here at Peitho Cup 2025. I'd also like to extend a welcome to our special guest, Mr. Thomas Lawrence, sir, and to the head of Department of the School of Law, Dr. Andrew Sebastian. Before we begin, I request everyone to kindly maintain decorum during the debate. As participants and audience members, let's keep in mind the general code of conduct. Decorum is to be maintained at all times and avoid creating any sort of disturbance in the auditorium. I'd also like to provide an overview of the equity policy for the participants. Avoid making personal attacks and the usage of slurs against any individual. This includes using reclaimed language that belongs to historically oppressed groups unless you belong to that group. Avoid making generalizations or exhibiting discriminatory behavior on the basis of protected attributes. and avoid using unnecessarily graphic language, excessive sarcasm, and extremely mocking statements when making arguments. Please note that any equity violation will be accompanied by strict consequences, and the adjudication panel may penalize it as they see fit. The motion for the finale round is: this House believes that the 2026 Delimitation Commission should ensure one vote, one value through population-based representation. On one side, we have Team PC31, the government bench, who will argue in favor of the motion. And on the other, we have PC06, the opposition bench, who will contest it. Participants, please come to the stage. The debate will proceed in the Asian Parliamentary format. Each team has 3 speakers. The government bench, consisting of the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and the government whip, and the opposition bench, consisting of the Leader of the Opposition, Deputy Leader of the Opposition, and the opposition whip. Each substantive speech will be 7 minutes, with an extra 1 minute, followed by a 20-second grace period, bringing it to a total time of 8 minutes plus 20 seconds. The reply speech will be of 4 minutes, also with an extra minute and a 20-second grace period, bringing it to a total of 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Time signals will be indicated by the timekeeper as follows: a single buzzer at the end of the first minute, and at the end of the at the beginning of the 7th minute, a double buzzer at the end of the 8th minute. For reply speeches, a single buzzer at the 4th minute and a double buzzer at the 5th minute. Post the 20-second grace period, there will be a continuous buzzer. Points of information may be raised after the first minute and before the last minute of substantive speeches, but not in reply speeches. Speakers must accept at least 1 POI. The moderator will not be acknowledging the POIs. It is entirely up to the speaker holding the floor to accept or reject a POI. If the rules and regulations are clear to the participants, we will begin with the debate. Without further ado, let us begin the grand finale. Calling upon the Prime Minister to open the debate and present the government's case. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Hello. Warm greetings to one and all present here. Today, I am Prime Minister and the first speaker from the side of proposition. We strongly believe that the 2026 delimitation should ensure one vote, one value through population-based representation. This House, this House mentioned in our motion represent the Indian Parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha with decision-making body. To a 2026 delimitation, the redrawing of Parliament and Assembly constituency, scheduling the limit of the freeze imposed by the 42nd Amendment 1976 and extended by 84th Amendment 2002. One vote, one value is the principle that every citizen votes should carry only one equal value for that, one equal weight for that, meaning constituency should be appropriated strictly according to the population, so that a representation form of large population does not represent disappropriate more people. Population-based representation. Population-based representation is the allocation of seat in Parliament and the state assemblies purely based on the latest census population figures, without giving special weightage to the geographical or historical or other social economic constituencies. Under this motion, the Indian Parliament will conduct 2026 delimitation, so that every constituency represent roughly the same number of citizens in that particular region, ensuring equal values for each vote across the state. First, I would like to explain why is this motion necessary. A half century freeze. Yes, please.
When the Prime Minister has mentioned that it should apply to every constituency. Does this include the union territories?
No, the union territories are not included as a constituency, but there will be a separate representation.
Thank you.
Yes. So my first argument, I am going to explain why is this motion necessary. A half of the century freeze grows malappropriational. Since 1970, India froze appropriational of seat between states, state and effectively basis on the constituencies. So that state implementing family planning would not lose representation. The freeze kept in place by the constitutional amendments and legislation means that the current interstate state distribution is still based on the older population structure, production significance, and disparities in limits. Thirdly, I would like to argue on the basis that it also shows democratic equality. How? Democratic equality foundation is equal political worth. Large diversities in constitutions population mean identical votes have different power. This is unjust in a majoritarian representation system. But because the freeze since 1970s, the case of the census bases have produced demonstrable and malappropriation of authorities. This approach reduces the disparities and growing of the representation in the parliament. My fourth argument is going to be conformity with population reality. So representation must reflect where India's population actually live today, not where they lived in 1971s or 1970s. India has a chance India has changed dramatically in the last 50 years. Urbanization, intense migration, even population growth. When population growth means even population growth of these constituencies. Constituency has no longer matched of the reality of who needs representation. Cities like Delhi, Bombay, Mumbai, Karnataka, Bangalore have grown exponentially, but remain underrepresented in rural areas with population rural areas with population held disproving or they are not able to raise their voices. So I would like to conclude our stance. So today we have shown that why 2026 delimitization must ensure one vote, one value through population representation. Every citizen deserves equal voice, equal chance. India has changed drastically last 50 years since 1970s. The constitution reflects today population, urbanization, demographic shifts, urbanization and whatnot. This is to ensure a fair representation. In short, In short, delaying or ignoring population-based delimitation will reduce equality, weakens democracy, and demolishes the faith between the people for the democracy. This House must vote in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Leader of the Opposition, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. The proposition presents a simplistic arithmetic of democracy, ignoring its complex geometry of unity. While they champion a majoritarian principle of pure population, we stand here to defend the federal soul of India. We as opposition reject this motion. The definition of what vote, one value is a reductionist fantasy that equates a democracy with mere census. Population-based representation, in their view, is an absolute unyielding rule that would elevate demographic weight above all our constitutional values. Our burden is threefold: to prove that such a move is philosophically unjust, constitutionally myopic, and pragmatically catastrophic for the Indian Union. My first point is philosophical, guarding against the tyranny of the majority. The proposition's argument is a pure, unadulterated form of majoritarianism, a concept warned against by political philosophers for centuries. John Stuart Mill, in his seminal work on liberty, which talks about individual rights and utilitarianism, cautioned that the will of the majority could become as oppressive as any single tyrant. The Constitution was not designed for a homogeneous nation state, but for a vibrant and diverse civilization. Ambedkar, in his speech to the Constitutional Assembly, which is revolutionary for our Indian nation and constitution, said that to place liberty above equality is to ignore the social structure. Democracy is not just about counting heads, it's also about the lives of the people living in the mountains, in the villages, near us. The proposition's model would silence the voices of smaller states and regions, reducing our polity to a brutal numbers game. My second point is constitutional, which is the federal balance is the basic structure. The Indian Union is not a unitary state. It is a federation of states. The current composition of the Lok Sabha, frozen since 1976, is not an anomaly, but a critical element of the federal bargain. Most critically, the federal balance is part of the basic structure of the Constitution, as affirmed by the Supreme Court in the landmark case of Keshav Nanda Bharti. To unleash a purely population-based delimitation would fundamentally alter the representative character of the Lok Sabha, undermining the principle and potentially violating our basic structure doctrine. My third point is pragmatic: the peril of punishing success and rewarding failure. Let us speak plainly. The proposition's plan would have devastatingly practical consequences. It can create a two-tiered citizenship: first-class citizens in states whose population share has grown, and second-class states in states that have needed the national call for family planning. I would like to give two important points as the opposition. States like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, which have invested heavily in health, education, and women empowerment, leading to low fertility rates, educational importance, would see their political influence drastically diminished. The reward for contributing to national development and national success would be political marginalization. This move would perversely incentivize states to abandon progressive social policies. Yes, please.
So does the opposition mean to state that the states that have not effectively implemented population control measures should be punished with unequal representation?
I think the proposition is likely taking it to another direction. I'm talking about how the states which have by honest work and continuous work throughout these years have contributed to the national success, and how it would be derailed with the new with this delimitation of the proposition and the House that it proposed. This move would obviously incentivize the states to abandon progressive social policies, don't you think? Why should a state invest in population stabilization if it leads to a loss of political progress? This would be the contention by the politics and the societies nearby. In conclusion, the proposition offers us a simplistic, brutal arithmetic that betrays the genius of Indian Republic. They offer the tyranny of numbers, but we defend the symphony of states. We must not replace the delicate balance of our constitution with a crude population count. We must not punish states for the success. We must not sacrifice national unity at the altar of a mathematical abstraction. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Now we call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to take the floor.
Hello. A very good afternoon to everyone present here, to my learned opposition and to the learned panel. I stand here as the Deputy Prime Minister for the side of the government, and I am here to state why we firmly believe that the 2026 delimitation should ensure one vote, one value through population-based representation. As my Prime Minister has already strongly established, we have covered upon the point that the India of today is much different than it was 50 years ago. We cannot operate in a vacuum where 50 years of population growth is ignored, demographic changes is pushed to the sides, and only the ground reality of what is convenient to the people in the past can be considered. On this note, let me move on to my first argument, which is about the surge in the youth population and the India of today. We value ourselves as a country with a high amount of young people. We value their contributions to our economy, and yet we do not give them the chance to be heard. When we talk about population-based demography being considered for one vote, one value, we are talking about those people who have been born in the years 50 years that have passed since the last census. Their considerations must also be taken. They should also be given a chance to have fair representation at the center. The opposition has stated that a population-based demographical change of delimitation would lead to people losing their voices. We counter that only if we acknowledge the fact that the population has grown and changed, and that has been a growth which is not proportional all across the country, can we go for further development. Right now, the reality is that a larger population is represented by a lesser number of people, whereas a lesser population has more seats and their voices are heard. By stating and penalizing, as they themselves have stated, against our point, stating that we are penalizing the countries for the states for their growth, we counter that you are penalizing them for the people that have been born into this reality. We cannot state that just because one policy was not followed, they do not deserve to have their voices heard. That is not the kind of India that we hope to create, and that goes against the very principles of representative democracy, the spirit of the constitution, and the need for having the democratic votes in the first place. On our second point, we move to accountability and governance. When there is... Yes.
What does the proposition have to say about states which have experienced population growth but are still against the delimitation, because it will still give them less representation in the parliament itself, like Punjab?
We state that these things have been taken into consideration, as that's been seen in the constitution. Delimitation has been put forth as the correct mode of determining the constituencies and determining the votings in various places. So we believe that a census and this population-based thing would ultimately result in proper representation for everybody when it is implemented at the correct time. Moving on to my next argument, accountability and governance. Specifically, catering to the needs of the people is what the government exists for. When there are not enough representation or representatives catering to the needs of a larger population, it leads to stagnation in growth. When we are talking about the fact that in a state like Madhya Pradesh, obviously a larger population is represented by a lesser number of seats in the Lok Sabha, as compared to a state like Tamil Nadu, which has a smaller population per constituency but a larger number of seats in the center. This leads to the fact that their vote is reducing in value due to the fact that the representation itself is reduced. We argue that when we have a population-based delimitation that is done, it acknowledges the fact that India has grown as a country and that its demographic has changed and allows the people to have a chance to get the representation that they need at the center. Expecting a larger population to be represented by a lesser number of people solely due to the fact that the census was not been conducted and that these numbers are frozen in time is not what the Constitution envisioned or what the Constitution fosters. We argue that one vote, one value, the principle of democracy, is the fact that every person has a chance for their voices to be heard. Targeting and making this seem to be majoritarianism is what the opposition is stating, but we argue that it reduces the autonomy of the people and it reduces their value in the country as a whole. One person's worth and contribution, their choice and their voice should also be heard, and which is why we believe that a population-based census and delimitation is required, because right now it is not being heard. The proportionality is not reflected in the reality of what is India today. The demographic has changed. There has been a proportional shift of people from rural to urban areas. The population has increased, yes, due to failures in governance, but that does not mean that the state should be penalized for that particular. No, this is more, it's only going to be an extension of a principle that is already stagnant and has already not served its purpose. Continuously delaying or stating that taking the population census again and relimiting the seats goes against the constitutional values, which states that there should be proportional representation of the people at the center. Therefore, the government strongly believes that delimitation should ensure one vote, one value through population-based representation. The value of every person in our country is equally contained and is ensured by the fact that the delimitation has been done based on the actual reality of our country. The one vote, one value does not just talk about every person having the right to vote. No, it talks about the fact that even if you are living in a rural area or an urban area, regardless of which state you are actually residing in, you have the right to choose and you have a right to have your voice heard. In the current system, that is not reflected when a large number of people's voices are being ignored due to the fact that their constituency is not accurately represented. Therefore, we believe that the 2026 delimitation should ensure one vote, one value through population-based representation, and that this is the correct forum to do so, as has been envisioned in the Constitution and as has been done in the years past. Stating that there is no need for this new population-based census to be done, or proposing a new model and ignoring the fact that we have been in a time freeze for more than 50 years, is not acknowledging the reality of India and instead pushes us even more backwards without allowing us to understand who is living in our country, what are the needs of the people, and why they are going to be voting for and what their needs are. Everyone's voices deserve to be heard, and we believe that even the population has increased in some states disproportionately, those people are still residents of India, they are citizens of India, and they deserve to have their opinions and voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Deputy Leader of the Opposition, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, honorable adjudicators, the opponents and fellow members. Before I begin, I would like to first mention a few of the statements made by the proposition, after which I will be talking about three main points, which will be establishing an understanding of the current regime and how that affects India's own one vote, one value system, then talking about maintaining effective representation despite all this, and finally I will end with probable solutions to counter or at least benefit the citizens more in terms of representation from voting rights. Now, to begin with, the proposition had made a few statements regarding how the opposition does not acknowledge the reality of India, how the India today is very different from the India that was there before, and only if we acknowledge the population gain can we grow as a country. To which the opposition wholeheartedly agrees. They're absolutely right. The India today is not the India that was there before. Then we have acknowledged the reality of India, which is why we are stating that simply doing a vote representation based on numerics is not going to effectively help or effectively represent the people who have different kind of factors. Like it could be geographical factors. It could also be a factor that they don't have access to such kind of distribution networks of voting systems. How are we going to be able to represent them appropriately? I would like to propose a figure in front of all of you. The population disparity is so unequal that in 2021 it was recorded that Uttar Pradesh has 250 million residents in India. Meanwhile, Kerala in 2021 is recorded as 35 million. That means that one MP represents 3 million voters in UP, but one MP in Kerala only represents 1.75 million voters. The difference is astonishing to the opposition, which is why we have mentioned about how the current understanding is that underrepresenting smaller states would break the contract that Rousseau has proposed in social contract theory. Now, let's explain what that is. He basically emphasizes that legitimate representation of citizens in a country only arises from fair representation of all of them. And making the representation based on numericals is simply underrepresenting those smaller states. And yes, there is legal backing. Article 1, Article 81, Article 82, and 170 all mandate proportional representation. But, and this was mentioned by the proposition, the intent, the constitutional intent should also be taken into account. They did this to balance federal equity. That is exactly what the opposition is arguing for, balancing federal equity. And there is a reason why there is a proposal of amendments of the constitution. In dynamic changes, there requires times where one must understand when is the right way to move forward. The opposition is arguing for moving forward. We are not saying go back. We are not simply saying that 2026 delimitation is wrong and we should stop there. No. We have to figure out how to move appropriately and how to move better for representing our citizens. Now, this goes into my next point, which is maintaining effective representation. Equalizing votes numerically ignores the geographical, cultural, and administrative realities because sparse or hard-to-reach regions require a lot of MPs to manage that much amount of territories with fewer people. Now, this is also emphasized by John Stuart Mill, as mentioned by my leader of opposition, where he says that democracy must have each individual's opinion or voice represented, but he also stated that democracy must ensure meaningful influence, not simply arbitrary equal vote counting. What that means is, if someone's vote counts equally on paper, but this representation is not seen or cannot effectively address the needs due to geography or any other kind of challenges, then true democratic equality, which India has always strived, maintained, and protected, is not going to be achieved. Now let's move into the actual solutions that we propose. The solutions we propose are, first, to increase the number of seats in the Lok Sabha. Now, this could be done by because of the fact India's original ratio for the Lok Sabha was around 1 MP for 750,000 citizens. This would mean that if we propose the same formula right now, it would be roughly 1,872 members of the Lok Sabha, which would ensure equal representation. However, the opposition also notes this would require a lot of not only logistics but a lot of funding as well. But the argument here is what is going to take precedence? Democratic fairness of the country or simple, more logistic burden or something like that? It's something for the government and the opposition to decide together. Furthermore, the second solution is maintaining the current seats, which is 848 model. Yes?
Would this proposed solution not even further extend the amount of delay that has already occurred in representative democracy in our country and the number of seats in the center?
Yes, it would. It might as well. But this is the exact kind of argument that you're proposing for equal representation, which is why it's the first solution, and I will be going further on to propose the other ones. Now, the second one is maintaining current seats, which is 848 seat model. What this means is that the total number of seats, which is now, like right now, the Lok Sabha has a maximum current strength of 543, with the maximum being 552 members. What we would propose is the total number of seats could increase per state so that no state loses current representation at around 848 seats. This has been estimated by experts, constitutional experts and others like S. Rajagopalan sir. Now, this would ensure political stability and federal balance, and large states, which would gain more representation, would also do this without penalizing the smaller states, which is what the opposition has argued till now. The third one is reforming the Rajya Sabha. If we transform the Rajya Sabha to fix the number of seats per state, similar to how the US Senate operates, how they protect smaller state interests, this would soften the opposition to changes in the lower house, while also maintaining a forum for states to advocate their own representation and voices, as well as any kind of individual particular issues they may face. Now, if this is ignored, such delimitation based on population could also make smaller states feel politically marginalized, as well as destabilize federal representation. The opposition is not saying that this will happen. It's a possible scenario which the opposition feels obligated to mention while proposing a scenario. Because if you do not do this, there is a high chance that states which already have some kind of civil unrest or particular opposition towards such policies with regard to the representation may feel more incited based on the current way the delimitation population is being proposed. For example, Tamil Nadu, where the member of the government, Mr. Stalin himself, has already mentioned how Tamil Nadu is opposed to such kind of representation. Now the last one is to split the large states which have a lot of representation and to make those particular states balanced, having balanced representation. Now this could be, for example, in states like UP or Bihar. Why should we do this is because, for example, if Uttar Pradesh with its current population, which I said was around 240 million, if they have a projected share of around 14%, which is an estimate based on the amount of voting representation they have currently, after the 2026 delimitation, it would increase to 16% totally. This means that UP would have around 16% of influence in regarding national interests, national issues, while other states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu and all the southern states which, as the Prime Minister mentioned, have followed the 42nd Amendment to control the population, have only 20% together. This is astonishing to the opposition, and that's why we propose splitting these large states so that at least their particular representation would be accounted for. Finally, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition would like to conclude by simply stating that we are not advocating that there should be no representation. We are not saying that there should not be proper representation of our citizens. We simply are saying that the 2026 delimitation is not the proper way to go about it, and that if we want equitable representation for all the citizens of India, we must do this, and we must look forward at different kinds of solutions so that we are able to understand how to effectively help our citizens. We are not against the intent of the proposition. We are simply against the motion they stand for. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. The Whip Speaker for the government, you have the floor.
Greetings to everyone present here. As the government whip and the third speaker of the government, I would like to reiterate that we strongly stand that this House believes that the 2026 delimitation should ensure one vote, one value through a population-based representation. So I would like to begin by stating that democracy has one of its core principles as to be equality, and through this we would like to ensure that this is maintained and followed in the scenario of India. So one vote, one value is basically that principle which advocates for equal representation in voting, which is based upon your universal adult suffrage, where every adult who is above the age of 18 years old has the right to vote. That an individual's vote regardless of who they are, where they come from, what they can do or what they have been, doesn't matter, and they stand on an equal footing, that a person from UP and a person from Meghalaya vote matters equally. In a similar manner, it is to ensure that one person's vote is not held to be valuable or in greater value than another. In a similar manner, one vote, one value is a principle that is followed for the 2026 delimitation process, and hence I would like to summarize the arguments that have been made by the first two speakers of the government before moving to the rebuttals. Yes.
The opposition whip would reiterate the question: what does the proposition think about the states which have seen a growth in population but are still opposed to delimitation because it's still affecting them negatively, like Punjab? The answer wasn't clear in the Deputy Prime Minister's speech, so I'll put it forward to the whip.
Yeah, so we would like to reiterate our stance on that matter, that according to Article 82 of the Constitution, delimitation is proposed after 2026 with respect to a census having been conducted, and it will be followed and organized in the constitutional mandate. Delimitation is done to provide access and equal representation to each voter. It is beyond benefits, it is beyond privileges. Similarly, to counter the argument that has been made by the first two speakers of the opposition, I would like to state that they had said that it is stripping away the southern states or the developed states or the states which have lower fertility rates from privileges and benefits that they have enjoyed, and I would like to effectively counter that by stating that the failure of implementing policy control measures by governments of certain states is what has led to an excess increase in population. Now, what they propose is punishing the population who had no role whatsoever in such increase of population and a failure of population control measures that they didn't carry out, and hence punishing a population that has come out as a result of it by stripping them away of equal representation as it is given to any other member of another lesser populated state. Yes.
Don't the solutions proposed by the opposition right now give equal representation to all smaller states, then how are we punishing them?
So this is the counter to the argument that the states which have historically lowered their fertility rates and have controlled their populations are being stripped away of their privileges through the delimitation of 2026. So we are stating in a similar manner that the states that have failed to control their populations are also, it is a failure on the state machinery in the state government that has occurred. We do agree to that, but that does not mean the people of that state do not deserve to be equally represented, and that is who we stand for. We stand for the idea that the people, irrespective of the state they are in, must be equally represented and must have their vote, which carries as much an equal value as it does anywhere else. So, moving on to the rebuttals, it was stated by the first speaker of the opposition that a population-based delimitation when carried out is wrong, and that it supports or purports an idea of majoritarianism. So we would like to counter that by stating that equal representation does not account for majoritarianism. While there has been an historical injustice and an unfortunate population rise, a majoritarianism principle or a blanket application of such a word on an equal representation and access given to every voter does not justify their concern for opposing the 2026 delimitation. In a similar manner, I would like to reiterate the fact that members of states or citizens of states who have historically not been able to control their populations are for no reason of theirs or for no mistake of theirs being punished by getting stripped away. Yes.
The opposition will mention how the delimitation execution has been delayed from 1971 and does not reflect the true nature. However, this was done by the government repeatedly, the delaying of the census. Why did the delay happen? The government is so against it, but it pushed for it for the last 46 months.
According to Article 82 of the Constitution, which is what we purport, delimitation was supposed to happen after 2026, considering that a census has occurred. The 2021 census has been delayed to COVID-19 and multiple other reasons, and hence, with the fulfillment of the census, we propose that the delimitation process would occur. Continuing with that, the second speaker of the opposition had stated how people who do not have access to resources, for example, people in mountainous or hilly regions, people in deprived areas, or people in reserved areas who do not have access to resources and are underrepresented, how can this problem be solved? And we say that delimitation of 2026 is the solution for this. By granting an appropriate or a proportional number of voters per constituency, this will facilitate the member of legislative assemblies in each constituency to cater to their voters, to cater to the people in their constituencies better, in understanding their needs and implementing welfare policies better. This has also historically been the problem with states which have had higher populations, wherein with respect to a large number of population falling under a single constituency, there has been ineffective implementation of welfare measures due to obvious reasons, and hence delimitation in such a manner would restrict that and proportionally distribute the population with respect to constituencies, and hence in such a manner the MLAs would be able to work for the benefit of the population better. In a similar manner, it was also stated by the second speaker of the opposition that meaningful representation matters more than mere numbers. So I would like to ask, what meaningful representation do they indicate? Because with respect to meaningful representation, are we advocating for a qualification of voters? Are we advocating for voters to be divided or classified on who are meaningful, on who matter, whose voices and opinions matter and who don't? Voters are in a number. All those voters need to be represented. All of them need to have equal value. All of their votes should stand on equal footing, and that is what we advocate for. Voters are the foundation principle of the electoral process in India, and their votes and their principles cannot be compromised. There cannot be any classification that can be made amongst the voters. They cannot be qualified. They are all equal in nature, which is what the delimitation of 2026 aims to do. Hence, I would conclude by saying that the Delimitation Act of 2026, which would be brought about based on the principle of one vote, one value, and on population representation, will benefit the citizens of the country, will reform the electoral process for the better, will bring in efficiency. Thank you.
Speaker, Opposition Whip, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone present here, to my honorable opponents and the honorable members of opposition. As the whip, my job is to right now condense this debate into the clash points that have occurred between the two sides. The clash point being that 1971 census does not reflect the population growth in a lot of states, and that ensuring the delimitation will increase the proportion for these states. That's the entire argument the proposition has repeated on, and the opposition whip has asked the proposition multiple times. What about states who have seen a growth in population who are still against this? Let me elaborate on this example. Punjab has seen a population growth since 1971. They have 13 seats presently, and the delimitation gives them 5 more seats, taking them to 18 seats. But the problem which the politicians in Punjab, like Bajwa, say that when you go from 13 to 18, fine, there's more representation, but the entire size of pie has gone from 543 seats to 800 plus seats. Their percentage overall has still decreased in the parliament representation. They have effectively gained 5 seats against 340 seats being added. Their population percentage-wise is just dropped. These people have seen a growth in population, which will, the proposition thinks will give them a more fairer chance, but they're against this because it does not mathematically make sense for them. Many other states have argued on the same principles. Furthermore, when we look at the proposition, the opposition's solutions, which was to have 750,000 people get represented by one MP, it would significantly increase the whole size of pie for everyone. It will make it 1,872, which the parliament is very against because they do not want to go to the logistical upheaval of conducting elections of that sort, and they don't want to reconstruct a new parliament building which only has 880 seats. It will effectively lead to double the seats out there. So the parliament is not even interested in the solution, which would be the fair representation they want. And this is not just supported by mathematical evidence. Political scientists like Suhas Palshikar, who have studied India's sociology and politics from decades, have contested that a policy of this sort, what it's doing, it is pushing the northern states to push for the delimitation because they get more representation, and the southern states pushing against it. It's just creating more of a divide because there have been rallies in the elections in the northern states about you must have more children right now so that the constituency size increases and we get even more political capital over the southern states. And that's exactly what the southern states are concerned about because look at it from their perspective. They have invested significantly into education, healthcare, all of these facets following the constitutional amendment, the 42nd one. And in return, now they are seeing the other states rally on that way. Let's take more power away from them, even though they have adhered to us and helped us. We're not saying that we penalize the states who have seen a growth in population because that happens for a multitude of reasons. Perhaps the geography, the climate, the migration trends, whatever it may be. But why don't we increase the whole size of pie altogether? Why don't they also get the 750,000 representation? Because Punjab has no issue with that. South India has no issue with that. It's only the 5 northern states who right now have 45% election capital who have an issue with this because this will reduce theirs. This will give other people a share in the pie. And that's what the limitation is doing. So I asked the proposition, who is the delimitation really helping? States which have increased the population are against it. States where the population decreased are against it. Who is it fundamentally really helping? The proposition states how the delay has been kept on happening and does not reflect India. And then they use the excuse of COVID-19. In 2001, when the first delimitation freeze was supposed to be happening in the subsequent year of 2002, the government of Vajpayee, citing concerns about the fragile nature of the coalition government, said let's tackle this 25 years later. In fact, they did this, but in a delimitation act of 2002, they have given proportional census representation to tribals, not to anyone else. The Delimitation Act 2002 gives a 1991 census proportion representation to the tribals for reservations, but it still follows the 1971 for the entire population, which Vajpayee's government just delayed because there was a coalition, and proposing this would lead to a big political capital, and they would end up losing their seats. So it's never been about the citizen and fairness. It's about increasing political capital to certain states, leaving the other states out, and this is even exasperated.
So
what you have mentioned about the political issues and problems that have occurred with respect to delimitation, but we are advocating more on the constitutional principles of equal representation. So how would you like to respond?
That's a very good question, because the constitutional principles of equality and equal representation are not even remotely being met by the delimitation of 2026. Because what is it essentially doing? It is giving the southern state, is putting them on the back foot. See, in a micro sense, the proposition is arguing, is giving each citizen a fair chance. But on the macro sense, the argument falls completely apart when it's just one region of the nation who's going to be dictating political capital over the other. And there is a fix for this numerically. They stated that the voters are numbers, the voters are numerics. We have to look at it that way. We are giving you a way, which is to give 7,50,000 to each MP, but that's not being followed. I mean, that's something that's followed in many other countries. Look at China, for example. Their voter representation has still been under the MP requirement, which has been internationally agreed to be somewhere around 5 to 6 lakhs per MP. We have reached 3 million. This does not lead, the proposition argues that gives the states with a lot of population under representation. At the same time, it makes the MPs' jobs harder as well, because this new solution is marginally changing that. Our solution fundamentally changes that on a very mathematical level, which their solution is just delaying the problem. 2026 delimitation will end up becoming an issue 40 years later, when the population has further grown and there is more of an issue, and it's because fundamentally we never really fixed the representation issue. We just tended to delay it more, perhaps in a more numerical sense here to justify it, but on a macro sense it didn't make any sense. So that's all the opposition whip has to say. The entire argument by the proposition side was simply more states with more population will get fairer representation. That's the only argument they have really repeated. They haven't given us any economic consideration for this, any logistical plans for this, how the census will be conducted, what are the population methodologies, nothing. The empirical studies they spoke about, they are using the empirical studies from 2019, which has been not keeping in trends of the COVID-19 impact on population trends. Why? Because there hasn't been enough time that's passed for post-COVID trends to be analyzed. So this is a flawed data set to make the argument on fundamentally, and the entire argument falls apart when your benefactors don't want it. In the end, the delimitation of 2026 is not benefiting the people the government would like to say. The delimitation of 2026 is benefiting certain states while attacking the others, and when these other states withhold the reservations, they are punished by the center. When Tamil Nadu earlier did not want the NEP implemented, the center withheld the funds. When Tamil Nadu demanded for better representation, the center is fighting back, saying you're playing division politics. Is there any solution being discussed here? It's just name calling and it's just political capital and division, isn't it? The opposition has come with solutions which the proposition has not even discussed, countered, or had an argument against. And at this stage of the debate, it's too late for them to argue against this. So that's all the opposition whip has to say. This solution works for no one except 5 states.
Thank you, Speaker. That brings us to the end of the substantive speeches. The reply speaker for Team Opposition, you have the floor.
Yes. So my role as the reply speech member would simply be to give you a compilation of what my other members have spoken, as well as how that plays into account with the proposition's arguments. Now, to begin with, I would like to talk about how my leader opposition mentioned the philosophical perspective of political equality, which I think is very important, because it talks about how the constitution was designed for a vibrant and diverse community and society, which India is comprised of. And this was said and mentioned by Ambedkar in the parliamentary debate speeches. And he further stated how federal balance is important, as India is not a unitary state, but a federation of states. As such, while Article 81 and 82 do mandate proportional representation, as mentioned by the proposition, they do so with the aim of ensuring federal balance, which is something the proposition has not talked about, because federal balance here means that it's not just based on numerical equality, it's based on understanding how each representation should be given according to each particular state. Moving forward, the whip, as you all have just heard, has systematically broke down the arguments made by the proposition, including the fact that the government has repeatedly pushed back the census, which they have said is because of COVID-19 and other issues, but this has led to further degradation of the representation issues, as well as leading to more problems in the future, which can be corrected by the solutions put forward by the opposition, which the whip did not mention how to work constructively on, and simply counter them without giving them a chance. Furthermore, he broke down how the constitutional articles invoked, as I just mentioned, are not being met, and also talked about how the solution, which is simply to continue 2026 delimitation without understanding the requisites and the nuances behind it, is something of a band-aid solution. While it may work for the next 10 years, what about the next 40 years? What about when the population increases? We are already the most populated country in the world. It's only going to increase from here. It's not going to go down. What will we do then? To this, the Deputy Speaker has already given multiple solutions, which include, first of all, aligning with the proposition's argument of giving equal representation, which will lead to 100,872 seats in the Lok Sabha, which we have already mentioned the Parliament would not agree to because of the logistical burdens, which is why we propose other solutions, such as splitting the larger states, or solutions such as invoking the Rajya Sabha to take up the forum, as well as making the burden on the Lok Sabha easier. Now, all this has led to the opposition simply stating that, again, we want equal representation for all citizens. We simply do not see it happening or realized through the 2026 delimitation, because this has already been proven by multiple political scientists and other constitutional experts, as mentioned by both the Deputy Speaker and the Whip, and they've all come to the estimation that this delimitation, this process is simply a band-aid solution. It will not lead to actual realizable outcomes. The only way that the opposition sees the way to move forward is to at least invoke or at least look at other solutions. We are not saying that our solutions are the only ones. We simply push this forward so that we have different ways to communicate on this issue or debate against them. The reason why is because we do not think that the 2026 delimitation is going to be helpful or is going to realize the actual goal. Because all it does is talk about how numerical equality is going to be pushed forward, while not looking at the nuances of the geographical, cultural, or even administrative factors that still are very present in India and will always remain so because of India's vibrant and diverse culture. The opposition would like to end at this moment and hopes that the House understands where they're coming from, and the House understands that right now we are not against the proposition because we have a different ideology. No, we also want equal representation. We simply don't want it by 2026 delimitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. The reply speaker for the government, you have the floor.
Hello. Greetings once again. As the reply speaker for the side of the government, I am here to summarize and establish why we believe that the proposition side has strongly proved why this House believes that the 2026 delimitation should ensure one vote, one value through population-based representation. As the opposition has already pointed out, the point of clash here comes between the ground reality and what is the past and frozen metrics that we are in right now. We believe that the proposition has firmly established the fact that only by acknowledging the population changes and understanding the demographical changes that have occurred in the country can real and tangible change be seen. We believe that population-based representation was chosen as the mode for proportional representation to ensure a fairer democracy for the reason that everyone's vote and everyone's perspective should be heard and that their vote should have an equal value. The opposition also agreed with us on this point, but they have proposed only alternatives without acknowledging why the population-based representation was considered in the first place. We believe that continuing with the older model is not a sign of stagnation, but understanding why it was implemented in the first place and the impact that it has had on the country as a whole. Secondly, I would like to talk about the fact that the proposition side has established why this population-based representation is necessary at this juncture. The opposition side has continuously stated the fact that the census has been delayed, but they have not acknowledged the fact that it should have been taken at all. Even though the delays were caused due to administrative and politically charged issues, constantly pushing it even further is taking away from the context and the reason why these censuses and why the delimitation was proposed in the first place. By constantly stating and delegitimizing the fact that these systems have been put forth in the Constitution for a reason, they undermine the constitutional essence and the need for having proportional representation in the Constitution. We believe that the proposition side has firmly established how one vote, one value as a principle of democracy and as a principle of a representative democracy can only be ensured when the people are represented at the highest level in the best way possible. The ground reality cannot be ignored, as the opposition has also agreed with us. But the proposed solutions by the opposition only add logistical burdens to the country and do not offer a holistic change or solution. It is only delaying the inevitable and delaying what should have occurred long ago. They push the fact that logistical failures is the reason why this push has occurred, but we counter that when the action is currently being taken, there is no response or there is no willingness to adopt it. we believe that the proposition side has established why the population-based representation is essential and how this system has been implemented so far and how it can be improved as well. Therefore, we believe that 2026 delimitation should ensure one vote, one value through population-based representation, and the current system has the mechanisms in place to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. That brings us to the end of the debate competition. Thank you to all the speakers for a stimulating and high-quality debate. The judges will now take a few moments to pose any questions, feedback, or comments that they have for the team.
Congratulate both the teams for the effort they have done. But they prepared within the limitations given to them. Just giving an idea to both of you, think it over. Now, the whole argument consistent with the national debate, the ruling party and the opposition in this country. The whole argument is about punishing states. The majority states should be punishing people, states which produce more children. Like somebody mentioned, there are people advocating in South India, so-called responsible leaders produce more children. Well, I don't think it's a very big. The question is, what is this punishment we are talking about? Either the ruling party is dealing with it or the opposition. It's a question of distribution of the resources of the country, sharing of the resources. Now, if a particular state has 500 members in the parliament, another state has only 100 members in the parliament, I'm just choosing arbitrary figures. What is going to happen? Okay, individually those MPs will get some privileges, some perks and some benefits. That's not the point. For the people of the country who chose them, sent them to the parliament, what is it that's going to happen? Ultimately, all this boils down, in my understanding, it boils down to this. When the national resources are to be distributed, either material resources or intellectual resources ought to be distributed or shared, we have to survive as one nation. Some adjustment is required. There are states which are not endowed with, for example, heavy mineral resources. Some states are endowed with heavy mineral resources. Now, naturally, there's an advantage which happened in the nature. You can't change it. Instead of debating, I'm not talking about you people, this is a problem given to you, you are arguing. But in reality, instead of debating about how to handle the problem of sharing of resources to the common benefit of all the people of India, this posturing, this particular state has only 550 MPs, that state has 5 MPs, therefore there should be equality, democratic equality, demographic equality, all kinds of words are created. People quarrel over things which are inconsequential in my opinion. I may be wrong, that's a different story. It's very, but then think out of the box. Ultimately, what's all this debate about? What happens if a particular state has more number of MPs? What is it they're going? Now, instead of handling the core issues which contribute to the welfare of the people regarding the distribution of the assets of the nation as such, which are not evenly distributed all over in the geography of the country. Instead of debating that, we deal with all kinds of trivia. Whether we should speak in Hindi, we should speak in Marathi, we should speak in Kannada, we should speak in Telugu, which language is more ancient. These are all useless discussions. It only small minds who debate over these things. In terms of human happiness, what is more important is the material resource. Material resources may not mean physical material. It's also part of it. Physical and intellectual resources. Where how the wealth is generated, that should be the matter for great debate in any rational democratic debate. The rest of it, in my view, doesn't really help the people. Finally, the final analysis. The debate goes on and on like this. So, well, both of you, whatever be the result, independently, number of judges, they say marks. The preparation is excellent on both the sides. But think out of the box. I should have expected the opposition to raise this question. The ruling, the treasury benches are putting forward a bill. Well, they have just. Well, instead of simply meeting blow by blow the points raised by the thing, you thought a little out of the box. What is all this debate about? And I'm trying to sort of discourage you people. Yes, start thinking out of the box. Yes. Anyway, thank you.
Honorable Justice Chanameshwar, for your words and advice. With that, we conclude the grand finale of Peitho Cup 2025. Congratulations to both the teams for making it to the finals. On behalf of the organizers, I extend a heartfelt gratitude to our judges, participants, and audience. Thank you for being part of this. We will now break for lunch, which will be followed by the valedictory ceremony. Lunch for the judges will be provided in the banquet hall, and for the participants in the MBA block. Team managers, please take your teams to the MBA block for their lunch. I'd like to request everyone to rise as our dignitaries leave the auditorium.